Call this meeting to order of the Financial Management Committee. Today is October the 21st at 3:30 p.m. Bob, would you like to give the invocation?
Lord, as we gather to study the business of this county, we ask wisdom from above. We have knowledge that is abounding, but Lord, to use that knowledge in a wise manner. Help us to always put ourselves last, be the servant as we should be, as your Son gave us the example while he's here upon this earth. As we think about the things that need to be taken care of here in this county, we are mindful of each and every citizen and their needs. We hope that we make good decisions on their behalf. Help us to always do those things that are right in your sight. Help us to be examples that we should be toward other men. We ask this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Recognition of the public. Seeing no one stepping forward, we'll move on to approval of the minutes.
Got to approve the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I skip that? Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the?
Motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous. We have an agenda. Thank you. Approval of the minutes.
Motion.
I've got a thought on the minutes. There's a lot to unpack with these minutes, and I know we have a few questions. I do, and maybe Commissioner, the chairperson has a few questions. I would propose, and I'll make a motion, that we table the minutes to the next meeting and give this group some time to look through those. There's just a lot of stuff in there that we need to just make sure it's exactly what we decided to do. So I'll make that motion.
I don't have a problem with that. Does anyone object?
I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Second.
In favor of moving the minutes to next month, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll move the minutes to next month. Report of the chairman. Under A, you see purchasing update. I'd like to ask the committee to take a deep dive into the county purchasing policy and procedures. One, to understand what we're looking at, and then come back with any recommendations of items that you'd like more information on, you'd like clearance or clarification on, any items you think that we're overlooking. Mr. Long, how long has it been since you've had a review of your purchasing procedure?
I would have to look online. It's been several years. They're currently being worked on by the subcommittee, but is it 2020? It's been several years. 2020 is the last one.
Can you send everyone a link?
Yeah, we'll have a link emailed in the morning to the website where it's residing.
And then I would like to discuss a potential date change for this meeting. This meeting has been falling on commission night. If we have any items we wanted to move forward, they would always have to wait a month. But also it's a little bit difficult to roll out of here and straight into commission. So if anyone has any objections, I'd like to send out an email to kind of survey everybody on a different date. So you can look for that in your emails. Report of the county mayor.
Bear with me just a second here, let me finish this thought.
Mm-hmm.
I ask that we defer this for another month still talking it over with department heads and our constitutional officers, getting feedback from them. And I'd like to punt for a month.
So with the payroll issues, items. So I'd like to address the committee with the potential that we do have a lot of constitutional officers, a lot of department heads that have great interest in this and would like clarification. I agree with the mayor, we need more time. I'd like to propose a workshop where we don't have to have a committee, we don't have to go in and out of session. We just have a workshop, and Cindy, I'm glad that you're here. If everybody is okay, I think Cindy is kind of a member of the committee as she speaks for the trustee. I mean, we can definitely suspend the rules to let her speak, but do you have any thoughts on that? If we just had an open table workshop for everybody to sit around and discuss this
Oh,
item?
the payroll issues? Yeah, that'd be great.
I think from your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So any thoughts from the rest of the committee?
I think we'd probably be good if they had a workshop and invited the departments to discuss
How it's
the
going to
different
work.
options, the one with the week added or the one changing the department heads, make sure everybody understands what's being discussed.
I think that's a great idea.
Good? All right. So I'll send us out an email, again, surveying for a date. There's a lot of department heads involved. We'll look at the dates available for the people in this room and let
Okay.
everybody else try and join in.
Okay.
Report of the law director.
I will yield the, any reports deemed necessary as we go through the agenda, if that's okay.
Report of the trustee.
I think you're in there, right? We're on a roll now. We've got the tax roll loaded. The bills are at the printer. They're going to start working on, we had to inspect some proofs and make sure everything looked okay. We've got the information from the state for our tax relief and tax freeze. Hopefully the bills will go out next week. Everything was delayed a little because of the reappraisal, but we'll be on a roll before you know it. So,
All the counties have already sent me mine.
who?
I said, all the other counties have already sent me mine,
Oh,
that I have property.
right. Well, of course, the reappraisal put things behind. It was, we hadn't had one in so long. It was a lot of appeals, and so.
I have a question, Madam Chairman. Where do we stand on the investment committee? I know we talked about it last year, and I'm not sure where we landed on it.
Yes, send it to committee on committees with the recommendation.
Did we did that, or we plan to do that?
I think you did with the recommendation that this committee.
Is the committee, right?
To be the investment committee, but I don't think we heard anything back from committee on committees.
I think it went to legislative. I'm not sure.
I was thinking committee on committees.
Mr. Sittler.
I have no idea.
That was the motion.
I understand.
Yeah,
And we emailed them.
the last I heard it was staying in here, but
But I
So,
think it was being sent to committee on committees to make that official, but I don't think there was any word.
yeah, I'll be glad to look at, they're meeting tonight as well, and I'll make an ask of that. And what was specifically the name of that?
It's the investment committee.
Investment committee, okay.
I think it was the final recommendation in this committee.
with the investment committee, and I do understand the need for it, and other counties definitely have investment committees, definitely counties of our size. Do you think that we need to roll it into a component of this committee or a separate date? And I'm open to either.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have a standalone investment committee, at least for the first couple of quarters, whatever we decide the frequency, and then roll it into this, once we get kind of in the groove of what we're trying to do, approve the charter, do everything we need to do to get the committee rolling. And I think, Cindy, a lot of it's your availability too, I mean, and what cycles you have banks on, and kind of how this whole process works, and just a controls around that. So I think a lot of it's to be determined, but I do think we need to formalize it and move forward on it.
If you want the information to place it back on the agenda next month, like the statute and the investment statutes.
It is in the statute. There's no question, right? It is there.
There's
I've
an
seen it.
investment
There is,
statute
yes.
Mhm.
for the committee, and then there's also a statute that tells the investments you can invest in. It's quite limited, but it is out there.
How about for this committee, the Financial Management Committee? I'll follow up and make sure that it gets through all the committees that it needs to. When we get it to the point that we can have a committee, I'll find us a date and where'd everybody go?
Okay, would it be okay to report back at the next meeting kind of the progress of that?
I hope to have an answer before then,
Great, thank you.
because I almost think that they pushed it through. Mr. Sittler, would that need to go to committee on committee or legislative?
I would think it would need to go through legislative, especially if it's just gonna get kicked back here, and then you all create this subcommittee. Is that what I'm understanding?
It's a
It
statutory.
would be a standing.
It's a statutory requirement. What does it need to go to the legislative committee for that?
I'm not even clear as to why it moved out of here.
Me neither.
Yeah.
There's another statute for investment committees. I think that's ones you guys want to go under because it holds you harmless.
Can we do this, maybe between meetings, you tell us what legally we need to do to move forward? If
Yeah,
it's already there,
absolutely.
Then we come back at the next meeting and we vote to move it forward, and we want to make a smaller committee of this committee, then that's a thought too, where we're not, everybody having to meet basically twice.
Yeah.
And then we can report back to the larger committee. But, I mean, I'm wide open on how we get there.
And I do believe it's a smaller committee.
Yeah. But made up of the members of this committee. I don't want to dominate Cindy's time either, so I want to make sure we don't overtax her either.
Does anyone have any questions about the trustees' report? Very good. Would you like to stay with us? We love your company, or you can run along if you want.
No, I'll
But you
sit in for a
definitely-
little while longer. Yeah.
Thank you.
We send the girls always in September to the different cities that participate in our tax freeze program, and they took quite a number of applications to help our elderly, low-income elderly. And I have to go through and approve all of the applications, check their income statements and all of that to make sure that they do qualify. So it's very time-consuming.
Yes. And I know this is more of a budget question, and
Mhm.
I know some of the answers because we've spoken. Can you give this committee an idea of how many citizens that we have that are in that program?
It has increased, I'm trying to think what the final number was. We used to have about 2,000 on the tax relief program, and it's, what did she tell me? It has gone up quite a bit. 3,500,
It's a large.
I think. I would have to go back and check the numbers. I get numbers thrown at me all the time. But we've had quite an increase in applicants. So,
Report of the finance director.
They just passed out one that's actually, says on the top, if you look at the RE, it's status report number 3.
Look at all of them.
Give everybody a chance to get a copy of it. Yeah, it should have been emailed, I believe we emailed this out.
There's the rest of it. Take that responsibility out of our hands.
I believe we emailed this out Friday, and basically it serves two purposes. Allows this committee to evaluate the ongoing operations, and also shows that we are making effort internally to move forward to at some point, including with the implementation of 2012 Act. And you'll recognize on the first page when you flip it over, which is actually page number 2, if you look through, several things have been delayed. Like a lot of other offices, we've had significant amount of turnover. Some of it's to do with the salaries. Tonight on the commission floor, there's actually a request for some adjustments to help with that, and a lot of it's been in our payroll lately. Several of these you would have seen earlier, we're trying to do a lot of the cross-training and additional training. Right now, we stopped to do the initial training on the new boards again, so we kind of step back on that one a little bit. The next one's update the purchasing policy, which our chairman mentioned tonight. It is currently in the subcommittee, waiting for action from the subcommittee whenever the subcommittee is finalized. Same thing on the bid modules.
Can I ask on the subcommittee, where does it, is it meeting? Or is that the subcommittee that we're referring to here?
It's not there for a while.
Yeah, well, how are we gonna move it forward if we don't meet?
That's what I think they're waiting. I think this committee was waiting on the minutes for the appointed member for the subcommittee anyway, but I think they need to appoint their member, I guess, for this year. And then you call a meeting.
Is that the officer meeting or the, what you're talking about?
Well, they have the elected official association chooses a member for the subcommittee, and then the subcommittee is made up of that member, the mayor, the highway superintendent, me, and I believe 2 members of this committee, or 1, I can't recall. One.
So, how do we move this forward? I mean, you know, if the subcommittee's not meeting, how are we gonna move this forward? I mean,
So with the subcommittee, it was formed in if you read the Financial Management Act in 2012, it was formed to do the initial policies and procedures and pick the software and the details of that. So we have accomplished all of the initial policies and procedures. We are basically at just kind of tune up and move forward. As you'll see further down in the agenda under new business, we have an item for AED, for instance. This is a new item, not something they would have had in 2012 that's coming on for us to look at the purchasing of these AEDs and putting some guidelines in place. So going forward, this is not in the initial implementation. This is just moving forward in county business.
So are we moving it back to the committee then, or are we still?
That's what I thought we would do when we look at the purchasing. I was gonna suggest that when we get to the AED part, that we're gonna discuss it tonight, the issues, not the issues, but the guidelines for the AEDs. And then when we look at the purchasing procedures, incorporate that.
where's that in the agenda?
The AEDs are down, under new business.
I got it,
B.
okay, yeah. So you wanna table that until we get to that section?
That's just an example.
Okay,
They issue, the situation surrounding the AEDs came up this month as we were looking at purchasing some more. And Mr. Long pointed out that we would need to include that into our purchasing procedures to ensure anyone going to purchase an AED knew the steps that needed to be taken.
so is it your thoughts that we would move that subcommittee process or responsibility back to this committee so we can move it forward, or?
At least they're looking at new items and looking at updating. I believe we've accomplished the initial stuff. If there's something that goes back to the implementation,
Yeah.
So I need to change that back into this committee for the update.
Yeah, I would recommend
and
that.
that.
Anywhere we'd have a subcommittee, other than implementation, or, the original policy development component, I think it should be a part of this committee.
So I'll bring it back. We'll bring our current policy back next month.
Yeah, perfect.
And as we go along, if something needs to go the other way, we can look at that. But going forward, everyday business, it seems like that's not implementation.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other thoughts? Mr. Long, would you like to continue with your report? for.
Yes, and the bid module, we're working on it too. We've had some turnover. We've had several turnovers predominantly because the job market's good for finance staff right now. We've lost over the last several years, several Beth is the best way to put it. We've had more turnover recently than in the past. And right now, we're trying to hire an employee and we've determined, I think, that our starting salary even for AP is not going to grab the last APs. Somewhat under. We've interviewed for a week now and we're going to see if we can maybe find funds what we're at right now. Same thing with the contract module. The employee self-service, we're continuing on. It's delayed due to higher priorities. Well, I think we'd be better to focus all of our efforts in the payroll section toward the Chronos implementation versus going forward further with employee self-service at this time. Highway, the same thing on the purchase orders. We're doing their bids. We have since this past July. That was something that we did take on. But right now, based on my understanding from the last meeting, to kind of hold off on the POs and focus more on the timekeeping system. Same thing, if you look all through here. One of them is, that I did put on here is grant project of ledger accounting. That's something that's been going on since we adopted a resolution back in 2009, and it was made part of the 2012 Act. We do annually reconcile these projects, but as you can see, we're not getting stuff on the front end. We do not have complete records, never have been able to get the complete records. We talked about the history last month. What the employee was hired, 80%, supposed to be grant project accounting, and about 20% actually doing the project, but it ended up being completely the other way, so that's why it's never happened. And if you look in here, October 15th, we did discuss that with the budget committee. It is under old business, and I believe the understanding is to fund a new one next year at this point, or to look at it again this coming month and see where we're at on it.
You've got the grant report. Do you want to just cover that now, or you want? I've got a few thoughts on that. You tell me when you want to talk about it.
So is it under here again? It's under. It's the next item B. We've got the whole list under there. The next one is on talking about the Chronos system, and based on the discussion, we've got the RFQ probably to go back onto the streets this week. And the number one priority on it would be to reconfigure telestaff with the ERP system, make it directly uploadable. That's the one where the telestaff is actually a timekeeping system that we never anticipated having a lot of involvement with. The employee at EMS that did that has left. And they're struggling. We've not got a lot of training on, so we're struggling somewhat, but we're making it work. At this point, I think two things need to happen. We need to get training for both offices on the actual telestaff system, and we also, official training, and we also need to do some reconfiguration to make the system work smoother all the way from the beginning to end, to the point to where we can do the direct upload. The sheriff's department is
Can I interject, I'm sorry? With the telestaff, that's just for the EMS. Can you remind us how many employees we have at EMS?
I believe there's around 145, does that sound right, full-time, and several part-time probably.
Well, then that would include part.
I'm sorry, include part, is 125 full-time, then 25?
Possibly. I didn't look that up.
Just from the top of my head without counting them, I think it's around 125 and 145, something around that number.
So is it correct to say that EMS has the largest number of non-Chronos employees at this time?
They are on Chronos. It is-
They're on it,
they're
but the
on-
telestaff isn't working?
Telestaff,
That's a scheduling system that feeds to their Chronos.
So the Chronos, it's all working completely, and it's just not,
Well,
explain
I
that.
wasn't part of the implementation for their Chronos, and so however it was built, it's not gonna work with a direct upload.
How does
Because
it
the way
work?
it's configuring doesn't configure their overtime exactly the way that Jay has been sending it to us.
they've been manipulating.
And I haven't had time to figure out why, he doesn't manipulate, I don't think he's doing something
Yeah,
wrong.
that's not a good
No, he has to
No.
manipulate it to make it work properly. Let's put it
Yes,
that way.
into a spreadsheet to send to us to have the correct hours.
And
It's
we
not
want it
coming
correct.
Directly from, yes. And it's just because they have, the weird schedules and, holidays are counted differently, and it's not loading into Chronos the way that I would need it for a direct input.
And the reason we're here, we never anticipated doing the telestaff. We anticipated them doing it completely. They had, what was his name, the guy that left? Sam helped configure it. He left, I guess, about a year and a half ago now.
It was right after they got it.
Right after they got it, so nobody over there has a really good understanding. We have enough understanding to look at it, but the problem is we don't understand how it's completely configured or how it works. We do understand the actual Chronos portion enough to make sure it's correct, but the same thing is that I think right now we need full training for both offices, and we need to provide them additional system or take it over and reconfigure the thing to work all the way through the timekeeping system. They are more than happy to ask for help because they're looking online and everywhere they can to get help, but they need additional help on it too. So to make it to the point where it can be a direct upload and guarantee that it's correct, it needs to be reconfigured and additional training.
Can you walk me through what happens now? Let's say I'm an EMS employee. Are you saying that I have an app for Chronos and I'm logging into Chronos? When you say that
There's an app, yes.
they're implemented,
They have both.
so they're logging into Chronos.
Chronos
at
is
work.
just their time card.
Mhm.
Anytime they enter time worked, which a lot of them, the 24-hour people, they're paid from schedule, so they don't have to do anything, they don't punch or anything. But like, to request your time off, I believe they put that into telestaff, which then is approved by their supervisor, and that feeds to Chronos. In Chronos, all they have to do is approve their schedule, or their time.
So what happens with payroll? I'm an EMS employee and I log in and I log out. Does Chronos automatically do it, or is there a lot of manual right now?
Well, that's what I mean.
Right.
Right now, they don't log
They
in,
don't
they
do
don't
it.
have to log in and out. They're paid from schedule.
So
their
it-
schedule is there.
Although we
it's
have it
filled.
created, it's not working.
It's working. That's the way we've had it set up
It's
for them.
working, but like in Chronos, in their time card, in order for me to do my export, the export is looking at what their totals are in their time card. When I look at their totals in their time card, it does not match with, word for word, it does not match what Jay sends us in payroll. There's some numbers that
There's
are
something
off, because I think the way that he calculates their holiday or whatever, it's not coming through in an export like we would need it to just be a hands-off, don't look at it, just import it in.
I don't think she's
It won't
understanding to pay from schedule.
That's what I was.
I do.
There's two different ways to pay employees. There's what's called pay from schedule. In other words, these employees are dispatched through dispatch, and they have a regular set schedule. So their schedule is this time here, based on that they log in when they're supposed to on the dispatch, then it's automatically there. What they do is if they're off schedule, then they go back and basically amend the time card. There's the other where you actually punch in, it picks up at that point and punch out. Finance, for instance, we're a punch in, punch out. The mayor's office is a punch in, punch out. Me, I'm a exempt employee, so I don't punch in and out, but all the employees in my office do.
Right.
EMS does payroll by schedule. Sheriff is right now punching in, but they want to go to schedule, is that correct?
The majority of sheriff is paid from
Punch.
schedule.
But the rest of them, they want to go to paid by schedule,
That
but
they
they're
want
right now
everybody paid
punch.
from schedule.
And the reason is it's easier to do paid by schedule, but punch is usually better for your hourly employees. But the sheriff's department has an unusual, and so does EMS, because they're actually dispatched. So they know that ambulance, when it starts, they call in and out. There's other checks that actually call in on the radio and say they're there, because they're gonna know somebody's at the ambulance, is my understanding. So there's other controls. And that was their request, and we didn't see a significant issue with it, but.
So telestaff is integrated to the point where it will, as you said, export the information from the schedule into Chronos so that they get paid. But whenever there's overtime, there's problems.
And then it should go up to Munis. And the problem being is, it's a very good system. We even dial up and find people and everything. It's a pretty good system. The problem is, I believe two things. We need additional training in finance and EMS about the operation of the system, and I believe we need to reconfigure it properly. I believe there's some configuration issues, and that's what I was talking to Annette. Just like on Cronus, I'd love to get over there and look at it in Munis and help them with some of the configuration, but the problem is I can't even find time to get over there right now. I'm busy dealing with the grants and all these projects. So she's had to lead a lot of the charge, and I think what she showed me so far, I think that the telestaff is misconfigured. It needs some reconfiguration without me digging deeper and doing a lot of studying and spending a lot of time on it. I believe a lot of our Chronos is configured properly in the EMS and even the sheriff, but I believe we're not using it to its fullest. We need some additional coding. I mentioned the other day I was looking at some coding. A lot of them could be put in that would place some significant improvements. That's just from me looking a little bit at the system. But I believe there needs to be a full reconfiguration for the telestaff from the ground up.
Last month, we discussed a consultant for the telestaff.
Yes, that's the number one priority we're getting ready to drop on the street. I just mentioned it, hopefully the end of this week.
So just to let the committee know, we should hear something next month. We should have
Well,
a solid.
based on what I understood
idea.
is we're gonna go ahead and bid it, move forward, and if it's within budget, go ahead and award the contract and move forward before the next committee meeting, what we're hoping. We're hoping to go ahead and get this thing on the ground before the next committee meeting, if we get the award. We're hoping before the end of this week to drop it back into the bid, and once it drops in, it takes about a week to get through the paper, and then about 2 weeks, so probably by the end of November, we'd be pretty close to looking at awarding the contracts. If not in November, if not in the month of November, it'd be toward the end.
Thank you for-
The next one is the sheriff's department. Its configuration's complete. The only thing we're waiting on is for them to be able to I think the correct word is, let me find my email, is it sign off's the word I'm hunting for? Approve. We need them to be able to approve their time cards, and we actually have, if Jessica can pass those out from today, and this is what we're talking about. For us to be able to do a direct upload to sheriff's department, they're all gonna be able to approve their time card saying it's correct, the employee, the manager, and then their employee that's gonna send us the full data drop. At 9 a.m., there was 173 that both employee and manager had approved. 16 employees approved, 95 manager only, and 44 no approvals. Payroll should be to us by 1 p.m. to allow for any changes or any other problems where we can get it through the bank and through direct deposit. At 1 p.m., because they sent us an Excel sheet to pay from, and we didn't do the direct Chronos pool, there was 185 at that point that had all the approvals it needed. 12, I only had employee, 107 managers, and 24 no approvals. So we think they've made some stride, but right now they're still a fair amount from a full upload.
David, what happens with the no approvals? Do they get a check?
They would get a check, but the problem being if they haven't approved it and looked at it, we pay them, their check may be significantly wrong either direction. That's why you want them to have the sign off for the employee, the manager, and then go all the way up to what's the final step called? It's not a sign off, it's the one that would
Final step would be to sign off by the payroll.
sign off with the actual payroll person, which would actually seal the file, and then what we would do is drag the file on the payroll, do some check points on it, and actually import it into use and create the payroll. Right now, it's being manipulated through an Excel sheet, so it's not, it has the sign off, so she's actually looking at all these manually.
So we're at 24 no approvals as of today, 112. I mean, let's say you get the cutoff of payroll and there's still no approvals, you cut the check and they're wrong. It's wrong. How many of those happen where they're wrong, you have to go back and fix on a payroll, payroll?
Generally not every payroll, but we've had issues where people have sent up, when we're doing manuals, through Excel and time sheets, we had instances where departments has physically signed off on payrolls for up to 3 months and paid employees wrong for 3 months. It was
I mean,
the
it's a
health
variety.
department. They paid for a significant amount of time incorrectly. We're ready to catch them because something happens and we'll ask them for their backups, and their backups won't agree.
Great, thank you.
How much time do you think extra resources are put in? What will we gain once we're up and fully automated at the sheriff's department?
From their end,
Do they have 1 or 2 employees over there
they got
working on this?
1 full-time employee for payroll.
Will they be able to fully automate that after we've corrected all the?
We should automate it significantly. I don't know about fully automate somebody, because you're gonna have to have,
What do you mean exactly?
I just want to
by
help them. I mean,
they would still have to do their part of approving the payroll, their
Right.
timesheets. The only thing that would save her time is the spreadsheet that she creates, that she sends to us.
no Excel
We didn't get it
spreadsheet.
until 2:30 today.
it would get rid of the possibility where Chronos and Munis has differences in your payroll because that Excel sheet don't agree with Chronos, or's got errors before it gets into Munis. So if you do a direct upload, they should agree. So what the employee signs off on is what they get signed on. So if you have a wage and hour audit, so you got to think about this, you have a wage and hour audit on an hourly employee. We have the rules set up that are all wage and hour compliant. The employee signing off, their supervisor signing off, the final sign off, and it's imported. So it cuts down, as long as it's set up properly, it cuts the error rate out. And especially if you have a wage and hour audit, it makes a big difference with hourly employees. That's where your big benefit in the long run is gonna come from. But as I'm saying, we've got to have it to where all the processes work out where they can sign off timely. If they're not signing off and we just drag them in, they may be significantly off and we mispay the employee, so really only got one or two choices. Try to fix it the next couple of days or make them wait 2 weeks. And sometimes if you overpay them, you can't get your money back. We've had that issue. We've actually went to court before, a couple of times.
When we went through the EMS, you talked about telestaff and the scheduling that uploaded, and you also referred to the sheriff's office would use a scheduling. Do they don't?
They don't use advanced, the only one that uses
They're gonna
advanced
punch in and out.
scheduling, the only one that uses advanced scheduling or
Is
telestaff is EMS.
Okay, thank you.
David, I do have one other question, on the employee only, those 12 employees.
Mhm.
Do they actually cut them a check if there's been no approval on top of it?
Currently, everybody gets a check. no
Currently,
matter
everybody
what.
does, they're doing it through an Excel sheet, but that's something we would have to decide when we do the upload. So that's something that's gonna have to be worked out, what happens when they don't approve them? Do we go ahead and pull them in?
Yeah,
Do
we
we
have,
leave
we have
them?
employees who've never approved a time card.
Nobody's made them.
I randomly pulled, when he first asked me, I don't know if it was last payroll or the one before, and I can't remember the numbers right now, I didn't bring those with me, but it was very similar to this. There's some employees, there's some managers who never approve anything. But we don't have anything set in place saying I'm not allowed to pay you, if that's the case, so we pay everybody. But that puts a lot on us to make sure that we look at these time cards and think, is this logical? Because
So these that don't have, that only have employee only, there's a second check that
Currently,
you would
yes.
do a manual check of them.
But it's still saying that when you have manual checks and you got Excel sheets having to manipulate, because of human error, you come in with a lot of risk that the systems don't agree, and if you have wage and hour audits, then you've got issues.
Is the approval of the check, is that embedded in our policy? Where they have
It's
to
embedded
approve
in
the
the system.
time card?
They should be approving them. Audit checks for that on time sheets, manual ones, but
Well, some of the things that I run into for approving the ones for finance is, you know, they may have requested off the last half of the day, but the time they needed was 4 hours. Well, it shows 4.5 in the system. So if I don't change anything, they're earning a half hour of comp time. They shouldn't be, they didn't work that time. It's just the way the system's set up. So I have to go in and manipulate that and correct their time card to show that they only needed 4 hours of time to use that day instead of the 4.5. So the employees at times will approve that. And then, even though it's not correct, so I don't know what's occurring on the sheriff's side, but just because the employees approved it doesn't mean the time card's correct.
that's one thing that needs to be done and signed off on for enough time for the main person at their payroll to be able to review it for stuff like that too. Needs as many reviews as possible. And part of the reason is we've got a lot of convoluted and complex rules is some of the things to say. And even ours has some, for instance, you work, is it 6 or 6.5 hours you get 30 minutes?
6.
If you work 6 hours in your full time, you get 30 minutes of your lunch paid. If you don't, you don't get any of it paid. But if you have an employee where you say, hey, I need you to work during lunch, because, you know, occasionally you can do that. If you let them have lunch most of the time if they work 6 hours, then we have to do what's called a bonus for the 30 to give them 30 minutes that we got paid for anyway because of the policy. So that's some of what Beth's talking about, the bonus in the end, if you're not careful, the bonus when it should. So you gotta kind of look at it with a little, it's got a lot of embedded rules, but a lot of our stuff aren't necessarily the most embedded. And the sheriff has a lot of rules.
Well, one thought, and we don't have to belabor the point today, but maybe looking at embedding in our policy the requirement for at least one level up to approve time cards. And if I'm overlooking something, let me know, but I mean, it sounds like we just need to reinforce that step.
Audit, and this is where I'm kind of, we may even need to discuss it with audit closer, because when they pull the hard copy time sheets, they look for sign-offs and approvals. The system here, they've not been, so that may be something they don't really fully understand, that that's not happening electronically. I'm not really sure, but Audit always required that for internal controls, and when I used to audit systems, they required the signature of the employee and the supervisor.
Yeah, that's just good.
If they didn't have them, we would actually give them internal control findings.
Mhm.
Well, just take a look at it, and, you know, if you think there's a policy adjustment we need to make, then let's talk about that maybe next meeting.
We really, now they have their personnel policies, all the offices and statutory policies. We don't really have any time for legal policies right now. That's something that's actually mentioned if you go through all the things I say that needs to be done. One of them is in there is actually developing policies. It's, back in here, I don't know if I took it back out. But that is something that needs to be looked at. They'll write standard operating procedures. The question is, when we write our standard operating procedures, it may be something we bring to you, even a policy that, about these sign-offs. And then maybe something we need to discuss further with audit, because they are auditing the manual ones for the signatures and the manual and the hard signature, but I don't believe, and they may be signing off on these after the fact, I mean, and that would fix that issue, but when we're doing the poll, it should be signed off at that time. Something we need to look at closer.
That would be my recommendation, just look and see if we need to reinforce the policy manual or we need to reinforce the whole process. Because I just think, you know, having employees approve only their time and cut checks, that's just an internal control problem by itself. But again, it's not large volume, but it's something to think about.
Now, audit will have an issue with it, but the question is eventually resolved. I don't know, maybe something we need to discuss with audit.
Yeah, they should, yeah.
But, the same thing, we have multiple personnel policies because each statutory office has different policies. So that's another issue, and there's certain statutes for one thing. So the question is, can we adopt a particular policy? Or that's another legal question out there.
Right.
But right now, it may be something we discuss further with audit as far as sign-offs and see what their thought process is.
But I just,
Can you send us an email if you get an answer from audit?
Yeah, I'm gonna probably forward this to them and ask them how they're viewing these sign-offs, because that's a good point. I think there's an assumption for sign-offs, so, though like our office, we have sign-offs on ours. I'm sorry, approvals, I call it, not sign-offs. But we have approvals in our office by the employee and, the supervisor, and for all of them. Something I wanted, then the next one is we have the implementation of the remaining offices, the same thing. I think the number one goal, if we're ever gonna automate it and guarantee to the, at least a reasonable assurance that the Kronos, Munis, and all of them agree and are completely wage and hour compliant, is to deal with the holdback period. Because right now, those whole last week of several, about 180 some employees, times a basic guess. So you really can't have a good sign off when you're guessing on the whole week of, like our last week of being guess for overpay employees. It'll have been Monday, and it pays them through Friday. And then it kind of goes through those processes. And then at the end, if you look at the last pages, the two that are very far on, down on our list, there are two things that do eventually need to be in 2012 Act. Number one is capital assets. We started on that several years ago, dropped back to work on the other things, and we may have the Jordan started on that. And then the other one's trying to completely implement Munis into the budget module. Munis has some budgeting, but it's not what the commission would want. You would probably have to buy an integrated package, and it's going to be very expensive. What I did this past year is, in our Excel, we actually take a lot of the tables from Munis and drop those into Excel, and they look up the information from it. So there's some integration, but a full integration, no. I think we'd have to buy a secondary package to get what the budget committee wants. And probably a third party that some way integrates in with it. Looking at those budget packages, they include some of the things we want, and we've looked at it several times. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. So the last two items, the fixed asset module. It's sitting there empty? Is that what, the fixed asset module is just empty?
Yes, ma'am.
We have nothing in it?
We haven't started. We are on Excel right now. We started back earlier on to move to the Munis, where we ran into problems and we ran out of time, so we stopped. what they want you to do is put in the fixed assets, and then they run them back in time to the beginning of the fixed assets, looking for small calculation errors where we have thousands upon thousands of assets. So we spent, what, hour after hour, so we stopped for budgeting, came back, tried to restart the process, stopped again, so right now, and that's kind of what some of the comments I've got from our employees, we used to have it where, you know, during budget, year end, or tax year end was really busy, but other times kind of slowed down, allow you to catch up. Right now, it's a continual sprint. So even getting to these things are very, very challenging, because we're trying to deal with things like, you know, just the day-to-day stuff right now. It's got to be, the workload's changed quite significantly. And we did attempt to start that at least 3 times I can remember.
And one of the times was when the schools we were trying to have it all together in one system. So it's trying to get our assets and their assets all together in one system. It's pretty a little complicated.
And I think the munis, the way they do it's hard, but I can see their reasoning. They basically drop you in a point in time and then run back to the beginning of the assets looking for errors. So they want you to correct it. When you do that, there's differences because we may have rounded a partial month differently, and there's stuff, and plus we don't always get disposals reported timely, so if we've got disposals reported different times, those show up, and we have thousands upon thousands of assets that create significant issues in the amount of time, and then we would have to stop to engage other projects to pull money off of them.
Mr. Long, I understand the challenges, but it doesn't sound like we've been able to overcome them for quite some time. Do we need to possibly look at hiring a consultant to get these items up to date? We have the fixed asset module, we have the budget module, and we have the grant module, and they all need attention.
I think the best thing to do right now is we've got an AP position we're trying to fill and can't fill, but we've got to get over there, because we moved that person over to payroll to try to keep the Kronos moving. We have a analyst that one of us need to get to train. I'm going to try to get tomorrow to start training folks, even though we have SOPs. To get those folks trained, I think we need to focus down on getting a body there to deal with the grant and projects that does accounting. Like back in 2019, it was 80%. It's probably like 100% of the body right now. Because me and Ms. Brown have spent a significant amount of time on that. Will allow us to focus more on training and things like this Kronos project and fixed assets. Right now, she was working on fixed assets and some of these projects, doing more type things like helping retain employees and reconciling projects. Because we may have a person that's doing the projects, but they're not doing any of the accounting or keeping up with them. For instance, like the courthouse. Remember the giant Excel sheet I spent days on creating and had you to update? It's got bond funding, city funding, county funding, multiple pieces, so I had to create this long, and I think David Klein said it was a long, drawn-out spreadsheet, but before that, nobody was really, since the beginning, pretty much kept up with that thing. We've had a consultant, but they didn't keep up with the numbers. The project person, so from the beginning, it's been me, and more recently, I've had Beth updating it. It's probably not been updated. We've got it in the system for probably a couple months now, but we're toward the end of it. So things aren't necessarily getting done as well as I would like, but they're getting done. Now, where it's not getting done well is, for instance, we have nonprofits. We've been keeping, when we started at the beginning, we started putting in some of these projects, we started putting the nonprofits in the project ledger. It's gotten so busy that when I looked at it the other day, some of them are up to 18, some are 19, some are 2021. None of them are all the way to 24 at this point. We've taken the people that are working on that and moved them to things like budget and to help get fixed assets done for the auditors because of turnover and other issues. And I know that's part of the modern workforce. The average life of the employees went down, so that's caused us quite a bit. I think we had very little turnover, and it's changed in our office quite considerably over time. People leave for more money or better locations.
How much resources would we need to get all of these caught up?
The thing is, what you're going to run, we've got SOPs. When I came, we did, and we've got standard operating procedures. We've got a few that need to be done, like payroll. But even when you've got standard operating procedures, you need some mentoring and training because somebody can't drop on the floor. Right now, we're taking staff that we desperately need just training employees.
How about by next month, you come back and tell us how much resources we need to get these all caught up?
Called up.
Or up to date. I mean, our grant module is empty. Our fixed asset module is empty. Our budget module is not working.
As I'm saying, if we had the grant accounting project, we could probably take a bunch of that off of Miss Browning between that. That person would do a lot of that work, which will allow Miss Browning to go back with her, what she called her financial analyst, and we can start back on the fixed asset module. But the problem is, we've got to break enough resources to stop and go is what's killing us.
Well,
We start, stop, and go.
She's also only been here 1 week.
Yeah, that's what we got.
Don't run
Well,
around.
think about it a couple different ways. One, I know you're kind of mid-budget cycle, so I get that. And you don't have to give an answer now, but be thinking about a couple different lanes. One is, do you have any existing positions that are open that you could reclass into a grants accounting? You don't, okay. The other is maybe a 6-month employee and reevaluate the budget need at next budget, or to hire an outside consultant to come in and do this work.
We tried that in 910 and we couldn't find it. That was actually what was offered in 910.
You couldn't find a consultant, or you couldn't find an employee?
We couldn't find a consultant, and that's when we hired Ms. Northfleet. It was to be about 80% the account, and then it kind of got switched around. But what we end up right now, say if we start these projects right now, when we're in October, we back next month, November, we got to start with about all the resources we can get early December preparing the budget. So like me, Ms. Browning, Annette to some extent, we all start putting together the budget the way it goes, because we do payroll by position, and there's 1,000.
When I look at this grant and project list, it's either overwhelming or completely outdated.
It's both.
And what I don't know is,
We slashed the.
what are we leaving on the table in terms of grants, and what's the financial value of that? I think you had mentioned we had 3.2 million or so that you could not accrue because you don't have paperwork, documents where you need them. I just think you got something that voluminous, we need to step back and figure out what's the most important part of that and allocate resources appropriately. I mean, when I looked at that, I'm like, okay, what does this do for me? I mean, you know, we got a lot of list of projects, but no values and times. So it, you know, it's a start, but it's certainly not where we want to end up. But I just want to know of this, what are the key things that are not getting done? And it's really no fault of one person, it's just a process issue that we need to figure out.
Let's look at the first one, like right now, what's going on is the Brown Park.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking about the codicil and all the different things. If we followed the 2009 resolution, it says that all items are presented for a grant. What happened to that one is there was $500,000 worth of revenue during the budget cycle put in, and we never got all the documents. We never could get them once they're in the budget. Once they're in there, they're ready to move forward. And we actually went in and had a training, what's called the Project Ledger, with Ms. Northfleet several years back, 3 or 4 now, to see if she could front end load it, and then we could just make sure it's there for some of her projects. But we were told that which is probably true, that she didn't really have the time of Mr. Holt and her. There was a position that was after she was moved to Mr. Holt's office, actually fully eliminated, so she picked up all that work. Elimination, I don't think was a good idea. We probably should have migrated somebody back to finance at that point. But it's the same thing. A lot of things aren't getting in there timely to be looked at, and then they're coming up later, and we're ending up digging up stuff and finding problems that could have been handled on the front end. And right now, if you start auditing your record, we've got stuff on the H drive and manual, but if you go through Munis and move on to ERP, the documents just aren't there because of the time it takes to get in. Right now, if we put somebody on this, it would be straightening up these projects and just start scanning documents for months and just try to catch them up. And after that would be to catch it on the front end process. It's going to take you months before you can do a front end project process catch on any of these.
That was my question. I see the number, the sub-fund number here. The first page, you got 4 numbers, and the rest of them have 5. Is there any kind of way in which these things are categorized?
A sub-fund is like, you've got a fund, and
Yeah.
you know, a fund is it's got assets, liability, revenues, and expenditures, okay? Per GAAP, GASB, determined GAAP says you're supposed to have the minimum number of funds for good accounting and legal requirements. So unless there's legally required, in this county, we don't create a fund, because you can go to other counties, they'll have a lot more funds than us. If they have these 4 number sub-funds, they actually have assets, liabilities, revenues, expenditures, just like a fund, and they balance all the way through. So for instance, The sheriff's GPS tracking, it has everything that a full-blown fund would have, registered deeds, data fees. The one for the ARPA had that, it was like 37, the ARPA sub-fund, it's 37.1 odd million for the ARPA, about 8 million for SWIG, and about 100,000 for tribal money needed. So they're all over the place based on the sizes, but.
Yeah.
Then you get,
What my question is, I see just, a whole lot of different things, as far as categories. And I was wanting to find out if there's some kind of method here. That's what I'm trying to.
There is, and I had to pull it out, it's based on based on really which department initiated it, more or less, or what kind of
Because I mean, you got
function it is.
opioid, then you got the William and Mary Brown Park, Sheriff's Department. I mean, it just seemed like something where they were, when the fund came along, they added a number. And that's what I'm trying to understand.
They're assigned pretty much in numerical order whenever.
Yeah,
You
whatever
get a
you
grant
find
or
out about it.
whatever, it's the
Okay,
next number.
that's what I'm trying to
For the most part. Now,
ascertain.
there are some, like our capital projects fund, we started them with 5 sevens. So if it.
Okay,
if
so
you'll
now
see-
that's what
There's
I'm looking
some
for.
rhyme and
Yes,
reason.
there are a few, you'll notice, because you get down, there are some skips in there. But the
'Cause I'm-
project, we have an 8-segment account number. The sub-fund is the 2nd segment, but the project is the 8th segment. Not all accounts currently have a project code. The ones that aren't gonna be, if it's short-term or something, we typically assign a project code instead of the sub-fund, but
Some of
those
these
two
are finished, right? Some of these are complete, right?
Yes, and that's the ones that David had went through and marked
Mark it
out.
out.
Okay.
So your projects only have revenue expenditures or revenue expenditures only. They're just if you want to track something or a group of something. The sub-funds require a lot more work, so they require full-blown balancing. If you look, we know that the opioid's supposed to be here for 18 years, so you have a 5047 and 48 going about halfway down. That's for your opioids because one of them's restricted and one's unrestricted. You have one up here for your hospital earnings everybody asked for. You had a resolution at one time that 25% could be spent and 75% of the earnings couldn't, so you have a 502.9 and a 5030 for the 25%. If you go down through there, there's a lot of these, and they're legally restricted, some of them are signed. But they basically, if they require assets and liabilities, revenue expenditures, like 5043, Tennessee Sports Gaming, that is money that you guys receive that has to ultimately be used for infrastructure, and it's in the general fund, and we restrict it back by law. So it has a revenue and a fund balance and everything else.
Well, I'm looking at one thing right here. You got William and Martha Brown Park, 5039. You flip over here, is this a different Brown Park?
Same one.
Same one,
Gets tracked different
5,000,
ways.
okay.
The thing is, like, if you have a sub-fund that has your assets and liabilities balancing, so for instance, a good example would be the courthouse. It is in multiple sub-funds because it has money that comes from a bond, money that comes from the city. So if the city money comes from 5702 under capital, the bond was, I believe it was 5716. And then it also has money out of 5701. But to put them all together, we actually have one project on the end where we can group all that back together. So if you want to find it, by our chart of accounts we create, you can do multiple things. You can come in and find out the fund, the sub-fund, the project. We can even go, because that particular project has the courthouse in it, it has the garage, and it had a jail pod. So it actually has a location for those. So if you want to find everything just spent on that courthouse, you'd put the 50, whatever, I think it's 5020 or 5020, and then you would put the location for that particular courthouse and it would pull all the expenses.
Well, yeah, you're kind of in the weeds. I'm kind of looking at this kind of more large scale. Can you just take between meetings and thank you for I know this was a lot of work. Thank you for that. But can you take and just clean this list up? And what I'm looking would be those that are complete and those that are still open that you're tracking or supposed to track. And assign the value of what that really is in terms of dollars. we can start there, and then we can work, maybe the next meeting, we can take and prioritize what these look like in terms of where you really, allocate resources to get it up to date. But this is a ton of work for somebody, and it was a ton of work to get this, I know. But it's just, we're just starting. This is a very involved process, but I do think we need to take it, clean it up a little bit, put some timelines and dollars on these lists, look at it next month.
Dropping this list out of our system is not a ton of work. What you're asking for is.
Yeah, we're probably talking about,
Well, maybe, let's just make progress, okay? I know this is a big deal, and we need to talk about, you're gonna come back hopefully with a recommendation on, even though they may not be quote available now, I think we still need to understand the resources you're gonna need to try to address this. But I think we need to chew gum and walk at the same time. We need to be looking at this list while you're looking at resources to allocate to address it. And I know it's a lot of work, so I know, but I do know there's a lot of money here, and we just need better transparency on this whole process.
And to kind of, like on the back page, if you look, a lot of those are your nonprofits.
Yeah.
So anything that's got a project where we want to attach documents that isn't like a receivable, payable encumbrance, and you want additional documents, you've got to have a project.
Yeah.
So on the nonprofits, we put their tax filing, their requests, their budgets, everything. The problem being is that's something we added to the office without really resources over time, so we really try to do, and right now, because things after things are just not getting done.
Well, I'm happy to make myself available to work with you offline to give you my thoughts, but I know we've dominated the meeting with this and that we can move on, but those are my list of questions about this.
Just one quick question, if you know where it is, fine. That TDEC grant for the Brown Park, where is that?
It would be in that project.
Which one? I found three of them now. There's another one right there, 5205-005. Right there. Second page, I think, on third page.
And if I can just bring us back in, there are a lot of detailed and weak questions. We are really deep. Can we do these offline? And
Sure.
Commissioner Brown, you go by accounting and let them show you what's in there,
Sure.
if that would be okay.
We have the municipal.
Because I think you're going to want to see that anyways. But I do have a higher level question. My understanding of the systems, this is in the project file and not, help me clarify, we have a module for projects and we have a module for grants. Is this true, or are they the same?
There's a module for each, yeah. There's a project and the grant. We don't use the grant one right now.
Exactly.
We're probably gonna use the project one because it's more detailed.
And that's the
grant one, you can
question.
actually add in whole new segments and accounts we don't think we need.
And that's the question I want for this financial management committee, is that we have a grant module that the county purchased. If I'm correct?
When we trained with Tyler, when
Project.
Kim and I had done the training with Tyler several years ago, they explained the grant module to us. That's not gonna work.
That's
For
what I
we
want to bring
need.
out, because
That's
I
not
think
gonna
that's
work.
what we've talked about before.
Plan uses the project one.
So for this committee, I want everyone to understand, we need to be talking about which systems we're going to be using. They're recommending that we do not use the grant module, that we use the project. So with using, am I correct? So I want that to be clear for y'all, because that's what we're talking about, is the system implementation and where we're going with it. So we're using the project module to track these things. So it's a good place to store documents, but it might not be as dynamic as we want it, because it's a project module. Which Tyler version are you on? Is it possible that future ones may have better modules?
We update, they do annual updates. We're on.
You would assume so, but.
We can talk about that offline. Maybe they have something better, that it's been a while,
Our chart of accounts pretty robust. I mean, that's kind of,
if we go that way.
our
Okay.
chart of accounts long, that's a complaint we had from the departments. we
Okay.
track everything.
So, we can dig into it more, but I just want y'all to understand that we're not using the grant module because it wasn't working.
It won't, I mean, for what we needed, it was way too much.
Input,
Yeah, if you're
resource
going to
intensive.
do- Yeah, if you're gonna.
I mean, it was a whole nother set of books.
Yeah, you're gonna have to hire a couple of people to run it.
I don't wanna do that. We need somebody for all this other stuff.
I think
Yeah.
the project master will work. We just need somebody to do it.
Yeah, and I'm good with that. I just wanna be clear with everybody what we're talking about.
Project master will store whatever you need.
Well, and it's what I said a while ago about having the account segments. And not all accounts have a project code yet. That's my goal, because over the years, I've realized that we're lacking in some of our reporting capabilities
That's
and
where I
how we
was
run
wanting to
things,
go.
because all accounts don't have that 8th segment.
We need to add it.
That needs to be, and that's another project
Yeah, I've
that
seen
we
that
need to
before.
work on, that needs to be added to every account that we have, and we have probably 4,000 or 5,000 accounts.
To be honest with you, it's a resource issue. There's tons of things we could do. We just hate to ask for additional resources. Because really, there needs to be a full-time person on this, has been a long time. That's what the issue is. Because we got a chart of accounts, worked on it, we set it up. For instance, if you have IT, we can, if you trace the invoice, we can trace IT, what department they gave it to, what building it's in. And if you want to buy a inventory module, we can tell you what room it's in. But right now, we can go all the way down the road. We've got a very robust chart of accounts. This thing will give you anything you want. The problem being is everything that you want requires input. It requires a bigger chart of accounts, it requires all that data to be input, and it requires all the stuff to be scanned, and that's where we're at right now. It's not getting, it's just not happening. It's not a system issue, it's a resource issue.
I agree that it's a resource issue, so maybe when we come back in the future, at future meetings, how much resources you need. I think you need several pieces of resource.
Anybody else have any questions about my grants?
Well, I mean, I think you're right, we do need resources, and whether it's one or two people, I don't think we know that until we know what the value of this is in terms of dollars and kind of what the status of it is. So I'm not prepared to say you need two people, I'm just saying that we need some help to get it current and then look at next budget cycle, and can we budget a new person in there? But between now and 6 months, do you try to hire somebody part-time to do it, full-time? I don't know, but let's just think outside the box and see if we can figure something out.
I think right now there's no rush to hire anybody because we have at least 2 staff members we gotta basically get trained and up. Because right now it takes our time to train staff, and right now our biggest thing is we need to slow down some of our turnover. And right now as I'm saying, we're trying to recruit employees and we're having issues even with the salary increase last year, we're having significant issues.
So you wouldn't want to hire somebody because you don't have time to train them? Is that part of it?
We need at least probably a month or 2 to train the one that's coming in as the analyst right now. That's like a mid-level analyst, and there's really, what's happening with that, we have them working on other stuff, but not the things we want them to, because they can't get to. Tomorrow's probably the first day I'll get to the analyst training. You won't be able to get to them at all until, next week probably?
Yeah, after the successors are done.
Yeah, because that's what we're running into right now, and we're also in the middle of the audit process, so we really need to get the audit done. The best time for us to look at things when the audit's done before we start the budget cycle.
Well, I mean, I would propose we just move on, but I think understanding resource needs, and still a high look at this from just a risk perspective, where, give us your thoughts on it. And if you are able to, get the chart of accounts pretty easy, I'm assuming there are dollar amounts associated with these chart of accounts, right? Not, it's just accounts, no dollars, no anything?
If you want to pull, if you enter 50020 in there, it'll have every one of your accounts. If you enter 5020 and hit expense only, we can tell you, it'll show you every expense year by year by year. But it's not going to come through here and show you all these in any kind of.
Okay.
You know,
Again,
that's
let's-
what we're running into, it's
Yeah,
gonna be.
I'm with you. So let's just move on then, but I can talk to you offline.
That's the end of my report, unless anybody's got any additional questions.
Thank you. We move into old business. Item A is the requested minutes for the Elected Officials Association. Any update?
No.
Okay. No update. Item B is grant accounting discussion. Kind of,
Thought we did that.
Well, I think it was about the movement of the grant position, and I'll repeat exactly what I said at budget. I can do anything that you guys need me to, but if we're talking about projects, there's two things that's gonna have to happen. If we're gonna do a project, somebody's gotta come up with a concept that's legally authorized, whether it's the mayor, Gen Ops, or whomever. And then when we completed the project, Gen Ops, the mayor, or whoever's legally authorized to do is gonna have to sign off that they basically accept the building or whatever before we make final payment. The mid processes aren't an issue, but those two processes are two that I really feel are outside the realm of finance or something that you would want somebody determining and running your projects, if that makes sense, for control issues and for various reasons. But that's pretty much the same thing I said at budget.
so if I could just clarify for tonight, because we're gonna roll into commission. When we move the grant accountant resource out of finance and into county buildings, if I was to propose that we create another position for the next 6 months till we get to budget from the fund balance, could you train them, or you wouldn't have time to train them?
As soon as we get these called up, it's gonna take time to advertise and get the position. By the time we're there, I can start training at that point.
So if I asked tonight,
If you ask for a half a year, that would be starting in January, we could handle that. But is that today with audit up there, and I've already allocated resources for the next, we come here and we allocate resources for a month based on priority. At this point, it's gonna be hard looking at the next, month's priorities where I've allocated everybody to really train anybody else other than what we've got.
so you're okay
In
if I
January,
ask?
we could deal with this, because I can start allocating resources now based on what I know is coming up.
Do you feel like we have adequate fund balance to take care of that?
To take care of 6 months for employees, but it'd be something I'd recommend you handle next year. It would not have an impact. 6 months from an employee is not gonna have a significant impact on the general fund balance. If you're just talking one.
Right, thank you. So item B, the grant accountant discussion, I think we've went through that. Does anyone else have any questions on it? C, payroll items.
And this is just what we were discussing,
Yes.
we are going into the Chrono system will help. This year, we've ran into significant issues with accruals and leave audits, but the Chrono system is basically, I believe they're gonna handle all the issues, and that's just something that I think we discussed it last night. There's really nothing I believe there's left to say there. When we get started.
Okay, so item 2, the salary survey. Everything it seems like comes out here is postponement. I'd like to postpone the salary survey discussion because tonight, the commission will be addressing significant salary increases. I don't think that now's the time to do a salary survey when we are still handing out salary increases. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Roll it.
Yeah, I think we need to wait.
We don't really have the available resources to help with it right now, but just to speak for the salary survey, I think it's a very useful thing for the county to show where the market's
I
at.
agree.
It would, and we could send the data to the same data we sent them last time, to the salary survey person who ready for quote, and it's in the budget, but I don't know how much engagement they're gonna need from us is the only issue for the next month.
If we postpone it, can we postpone it? Would you feel like you could get to it? When do you think you could get to it?
if you authorize me, what I will do is go ahead and reach out to the consultant and find out about the contract, because they gave us a quote, and start sending them data with the goal of be able to get it early enough, or at least to touch base with them, the way they can start working with us, hopefully get some stuff back early enough for the budget cycle, which we will start in January, and really you need to have it done in March, so it'll have to be relatively quick. I'm saying we'll probably try to touch base with them a little bit after January, because we gotta do W-2s and 941s in January. We haven't done, your current staff hasn't done anything with the new W-2 system like I did last year. I basically ended up doing a lot of it last year.
Can we take up Charlie's survey in November?
Yeah, I think it'd be something to take up November before we look at it.
Move on to new business. Item A, Kronos.
I think we
Number
covered that
one,
in
report
our
from. So Sheriff Craddock asked that we move his discussion item to next month, I believe.
As I'm saying, we kind of went over it tonight, but they are making progress, but we're nowhere near direct upload at this point.
So item B is the AED purchase requirements. So do you want to go over those, Mr. Long, or
I can go over them and kind of tell you my thought process, which would be the easiest way to handle it.
did you speak with EMS?
Was it, I think I had, Dustin spoke with EMS and he conveyed what they told him, so I have the information. They do register with EMS. You do register with EMS, so my only concern is I think we, at some point, would be prudent to add into your purchasing policy that if you, as a county, purchase the AEDs, that you do register with EMS as required, and you do ensure that the training happens as required, and you do ensure that the testing is required. Whoever purchases them is required to guarantee that happens.
And that's what I was referring to earlier. When you say, can I just get clarification? When you say that they registered with EMS, does every entity in the county with an AED register with EMS?
This statute says,
It read like they do. I'm
that's
just
my
wondering.
understanding when talking to Dustin, is my understanding they're supposed to. Do they? I can't guarantee that.
You mean even private entities?
It says.
It says, yes. Like Walmart
A
should be
person
registering.
or entity that acquires an automated external defibrillator shall ensure that, and it goes down through there, any person or entity that acquires an AED shall, within a reasonable time after placement of an AED, register the existence and location of the defibrillator with the Emergency Communications District or the Ambulance Dispatch Center of the primary provider of emergency medical services where the AED is located. And according to Justin, when he talked to him, it's our understanding that everybody is doing that. Now, is everybody doing it? The EMS can't guarantee that. They would only know what people's telling them, but
What about if you're just a person, you know, in your home?
I don't know that would
That's
necessarily
right.
apply, but
Just
I don't
wanted to make
know.
sure.
I'm not an attorney, I don't know. I would recommend, if
Well,
you're
it
gonna
says
do
a
that, consult an
person,
attorney.
a person or entity that acquires.
It sounds like you're supposed to, but I would recommend, I'm not an attorney, that you consult an attorney before you place one in your home. That's
I
my
thought about
answer.
buying.
So this was just an example of one of the items that needs to be added to the purchasing policies. It's just something that wasn't around in 2012.
And this was brought to my attention and asking us, we did it, so it may be something we need to add to the purchasing policy. So I inquired if it was happening.
Item C, purchasing issues.
Purchase order exemption report on page 54. We really don't have any new ones since last month, because you guys approved EMA. The one was from the mayor's office, it was informational only, and we're just noting it here in the case audit pulls it as a sample, but he wasn't required to do one, and it was just dated afterwards. So I don't consider it exception, so I just went ahead and put it here in the case they pulled. And while we didn't find an issue. You really don't have any new ones that require videos that had issues since the last one.
And with this fiscal report, we're just gonna continue on through the year, adding to this? Well, hopefully there won't be any more exceptions, right?
If that's what we do each year, we do it all year and then we reset it.
Excellent. Item 2, Hendersonville Library purchase.
That was one where we were contacted with the libraries and they asked us what they should do, ask for more funds or try to find it or go through their nonprofit. They met with finance, I believe, Friday, and what they've conveyed to me so far is they're gonna try to find their funds to.
She's already done that, sent me the transfers, things are already posted.
So they kind of answered their own questions, so I think it really needs to be pulled at this time unless they just wanna talk about it any further.
So with that item, it's similar to the other libraries, they all did the upload.
I believe they went with a different system, is why they didn't have the issue. So she went with a different system, and I believe probably what happened without speaking to them, they didn't realize all the cost or But at this point, they've already sent up requests for transfers, and they're gonna try to make it through the year, so. The only reason it ended up on the agenda was they asked the question, should they ask for the money, ask their nonprofit, so that, I think that was the original reason I put it here, to kind of answer their question. And they kind of answered it Friday, so I don't know if there's anything left to do. They decided to try to find it within their budget.
Understand.
Transfer.
All right, so we'll move on to item 3. Fiscal year 24, double payment of electric services for Hendersonville Clerk's Office.
This is the weirdest one. Our office was looking and there was a double payment made. Miss Ramona has contacted the utility district. She says multiple times they did not give us credit for it and they have not answered our questions, what they told us. We're just going to put you guys on alert and I guess also legal where they may need to talk to the district too. We're not 100% sure why they're not giving us credit for it or a refund, but we're just making you guys aware of it. Because she was having issues actually even getting a credit for it. We don't know why.
So one item that I'd like to bring up for this committee, and it kind of goes into your area, Mayor, is I found it odd that our electric bills are not centralized. So I don't know if this committee is aware of that, but we sent, the mayor's office handles, what do your office, you handle all the utilities come to your office and then you send them out. I know, like, you send them out, we had the one where the sheriff's office didn't get their bill. So it seems to me like AP would be centralized and that, I don't know that maybe you want to handle your electric bills or, I'm just looking that I would have expected AP to handle all the electric bills. I don't understand.
The bills that went out.
So this
We
one,
typically pay all the buildings.
I don't know why it's a function of your office unless you just want it to be.
Well, because we run the budget for that, the county buildings budget. I have care and custody and operational control of the buildings. That's why.
Out of your office. But it seems like for a centralized process, it would go to accounts payable. And they would just pay it. I just don't want you to have, unless you want to. I'm just
Well,
asking.
you might want to ask David, he just spent
I
a
did.
half hour saying he's having a hard time keeping up.
I know, I told him if he would do it, he wouldn't have to sit down.
If I could interject, Mr. Chairman, I'm just outside looking in on this, but I'm not gonna know there's problems, I'm not gonna know there's leaks, I'm not gonna know there's other problems unless I see those bills fluctuating and things of that nature. And the one who's closest to the
Would be the mayor.
situation, I would think would be the mayor unless he feels more comfortable having it the other way, but he does have care and custody. So it's gonna
And I'm
be
fine with
hard
that.
for finance to catch a problem he might see much quicker.
I can speak on the utility bills. We don't do them here. It would take time and we would have to have staff. When I was at Green, we did the utility bills and finance. They basically authorized us to pay and we had an employee that did those. But it was an employee, pretty much a full employee did for that. And they did look for variances and stuff. But right now, the mayor's office pays the majority. The sheriff pays theirs. SIP pays a few and libraries pays theirs, don't they? But the mayor pays most of them other than, who does the health department, and this highway pays his too.
A centralized
But they are kind of
plan.
moved apart, but the thing is, those are multiple partial employees. To answer Eric's question, what you do is you look for variances from the prior year and for current for the usage. So you're looking for a usage variance, so it does take more time, but I dare say most of your employees that just does this as a side don't look for usage variances. But do I think it's gonna save enough money to pay for an employee? And the thing is, there's partial employees everywhere unless they're gonna vote eliminate one, it's gonna be the same issue. But yeah, the best way to do it would be to do it decentralized, to answer your question. And how you would deal with that, you would look at usage variances from the prior year for the
So-
same month.
And I'm bringing it up because that's what the Financial Management Act is about, is centralizing. And that's the only reason I was bringing it up. And that's the reason I was asking the mayor how he would like it. But ideally, best practices would be a centralized approach through AP.
It would be the best.
Something to consider, but we're short on resources at the moment. Do you need an approval on this double payment?
No, we're just making you guys aware while we're still hunting for it, and then they eventually, just making you aware in case it comes up to be an issue on EDC.
How much is it? If they yank my chain, I'll get involved too, but I was unaware of this.
Well, we're still trying to deal with it internally, and I think Ramona's dealing with it, we don't know where she's at. Okay, well, just gotta turn it back over to Mike. Okay, we'll send it over to Leanne, because Ramona's.
So the last item we have is bidding of reinsurance. It's kind of a lengthy discussion. There's no time constraints on this item, so I'd like to just move it to next month, so we can clear this room for the next meeting, if that would be okay with the board here. Excellent. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Let's go.